All right, we are kicking it off here noon on January 30th with Coach Joe Lukacs, the man, the myth, the legend.
Hmm.
So we're
Great
going
to
to
be
give
here.
them a.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
go
Yeah,
ahead,
go
Joe.
ahead. No, as I say, great to be here and looking forward to our conversation today.
And we'll give some a few minutes to for people to log on. It is lunchtime. Let's heat up that lunch
Yep.
and get settled and um, give us a couple minutes to catch up. So
Sure.
interesting. You and I both read Dan Sullivan and Dr. Ben Hardy's book, 10X is easier than 2X, right? So
Yes.
you and I are going deep and hard in the paint around 10X mentality and 10X. And we know a lot of people in our industry. I'm just curious, do other people have the reaction that you and I had after? Now I'm reading it for the third time. I think you're reading it for the third time as well, right?
But I went through it for the third time, so I'll probably take it. I'll take it with me again to Italy this spring. I'll probably
Mm,
read it for a fourth time when I go back. I would say I think there's a lot of buzz and curiosity around it. Would I say that advisors have sat down and ripped it apart and R&D'd it and then threw it into their business model? No, I don't think so. Not to level you
hmm,
and I have from that perspective. And I don't think it's their unwillingness to do so. It's they just don't have the capability, the bandwidth, the focus to pull it off. Uh, what makes a great advisor does not make a great business owner, does not make a
hmm,
great entrepreneur. And
right.
if you really think about the 10X book or those principles, you're talking to the entrepreneur identity, not the advisor identity. And I think that's the key difference, quite frankly, going
Mm,
forward
okay.
from there. Okay.
I tore everything down, as you know, after I read that book. And I read
Yeah.
it while I was on my annual sabbatical in July. So first book I read.
Hmm.
And as soon as I got back, it's like, all right, let's tear this stuff down. Let's start over.
Yeah.
And because it just made so much sense, just like I've read just about everything that Dan Sullivan has written and Dr. Ben Hardy. I just read Willpower Doesn't Work, which
Yeah.
was what a
Hmm.
great book. Um, so just being surrounded by that stuff and just but I just when I read 10X, it was like a sledgehammer. It was so
Hmm.
clear to me that I was focusing on 2X activities and staying quote unquote busy,
Yeah.
but 2X busy. Not and I look at everything now,
Hmm.
even down to my workouts. Is this a 10X
Right.
or is this a 2X? Is this just checking the box or is this going,
Hmm.
is this putting the work in? And
Right. Right. Are you in an 80% zone or
mm,
are you in your 20% unique capability zone? Right. I mean, I think that's where I was talking to a referral this morning, a potential new client. And great guy, been at the game for 20 some odd years, trucking along at 700K independent already. So we
mm,
kind of check that box. And he wants to get to over $2 million over the next 5 years. So go from 700 to 2 million. It's feasible to do. But the question I always ask anybody who's got a big goal or vision is who do you need to become to pull off that vision? Because it can't be the $700,000 version of you right now. Like that will. I don't care how hard you think you're going to work or what resources you're going to deploy. If you don't change your identity, it's not going to happen. Right? That's the
mm-hmm,
bottom line. So I just think that, advisors are always looking for what I call the easy button, right? They're always looking for the shortcut, the hack, if you will. And success in this game, yeah, you can get some edges here and there, but it's not going to replace the hard work. It's not going to replace the uncomfortableness of doing it. And when I say hard work, I think this, qualified it. Look, if you think you work hard, get in your car and drive along and watch people that do construction for a living. I don't care what time of year, summer, winter, fall, spring. Go watch the people that are building roads and bridges and buildings and things like that
mm-hmm.
out in the elements. And then tell me you work hard. Okay. Because we don't. I mean, what we do is meaningful work. I'm not saying it's not, but by no stretch of the imagination. So I told you I really, really hard this week. I said, you got up, went in your air conditioned car, got to
Mm,
your air conditioned office. You talked to people all day. You solved problems, which I'm not saying is not work, but please never equate it to what some of the other men and women do around the country, right? Around the world, right? So I think if you don't have good, I don't think if you have good perspective, I think it's easy to get in your own head. And as one of my early mentors, Tony Robbins, says, when you're in your head, you're dead.
Mm.
So I think it's really important that we look at things for externally for what they are, and not get so caught up in our own stuff going forward.
I just find it odd because I know several people, you and I together know several people that read that book
Mhm.
and were not as moved as we were. And I'm thinking, I'm like, how couldn't you? How couldn't this hit you on the head like a sledgehammer? Because there's
Mhm.
one person in particular that is doing nothing but 2X activities.
Mhm.
And it's almost like, do you want me to sit? I'll read it to you. Maybe you missed the important parts.
Right.
But it's just, I don't think there's any book that I read for three times.
There's
And
only been like,
I'm reading
yeah, go
this
ahead.
one for the second time.
Yeah, that one I
By the
probably
way,
read about. That's still probably my all-time leader in the clubhouse. Probably read that sucker 10 times over 40 years. But if I think about the book, I mean, I read it the first time, it got me excited, I was interested, I was curious. I listened to it because I had it on Audible too. But then
mhm.
when I took it away, and I think this is really the key thing, and I've been really thinking about this. You and I were impacted. Where were we when we were impacted? Where were you physically?
I was detached. I was with my family on my sabbatical. Yeah. On the
Yeah,
beach. Yep.
I was out, and I was in Tuscany in Italy. Okay. So
Environment.
here's yes. So I think there's a premise here, and this is what I realized, like what's the difference? And I think you can take something that is very meaningful, but you're in your day-to-day environment. It's never going to have the impact if you had a blank emotional canvas,
Mm,
because you're out in a different environment. And that's why sabbaticals and renewal time, like everybody, I get this pushback all the time, like, oh, Joe, I can't take that time off. I can't, I said, you don't understand. Your best thing, I said, every one of my breakthroughs has happened on my sabbatical renewal window. They don't happen, as beautiful as my room is here, it does not happen in here. It happens when you're in a totally different environment, and
hmm
there's just something about the mind. It's just more relaxed. It's more open. It's like when you're in your office all day, you're just kind of grinding away. But it's like when you get out, it's like yoga for the brain, man. Everything kind of relaxes, stretches out a little bit, chills out, and I think a human being's more open to new ideas when they're out of their day-to-day environment. So I just
Yeah.
think that's a real, for everybody here who's going to watch this live and replay. I mean, if you really want to move the needle in your business, it is not about spending more time in the office looking at the screen or your CRM or your money line. It's really about getting out and having different environments, different experiences. And I remember when you decided to go independent, which I know kind of why we're all here today. I remember that. I remember that phone call when you got off the plane from Africa.
hmm
Hey man, I've decided,
Ready
man,
to
we're going.
go.
Like, we're going. That was it.
Gone. Yep.
I'm not saying you would not have inevitably gotten to that decision if you did not take that trip. But what I'm saying is I think it would have taken you longer to get there, where you were out in the bush for that period of time, totally different environment, halfway around the world. And there's just something about that. And I just wish more advisors would build that into their game. And they don't have to go to Hawaii or Africa early. You just go to your favorite place for a couple of days. Just change the
hmm
environment, right? Get out of your day today and do something very different. That makes all the difference in the world, in my experience. So I think you and I hit upon something in this conversation that you can read a book, but man, I think a lot of it, I think it's equally weighted on where you're reading the book or listening to the Audible or whatever it
hmm
is, not just sitting behind your desk and reading. I do not believe it has nearly the same impact as if you are in a
I
different
agree.
environment.
And for the people that joined during this conversation, Joe and I are referencing the 10X is easier than 2X, written by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Ben Hardy. I'm on number three, third time. Joe's read it he's on his third time as well.
Yeah.
And we've taken the action steps from reading that book to changes in our lives, changes in our businesses. And we'll we'll kind of kick it off now. People
Yeah,
are
let's do it.
got their lunch in front of them. So I am fortunate to have Joe in my life for 7-8 years now. We're going on as a coach, as a friend. Joe Lukacs has been a coach to financial advisors for, is it officially 30 years at this point?
February 15th. So we're getting close. February
Wow, we were
15th,
right there.
30th anniversary. Yep. It's been quite the ride, and I can't believe it's already 30, man. But yeah,
30 years.
that's the
And
date.
he's
Yep.
only 38 years old. So it's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's
Just
pretty impressive.
started this in diapers, man. 100%.
So Joe started his career with Tony Robbins,
Yep.
and his area was up by me. He lived in New Jersey, but his area was Southern Manhattan, which is all finance people.
Yep.
Took the leap of faith back in the day, and now 30 years later, he is the. If you don't know who he is, and you really should look him up, because I don't run into many people who don't know who Joe Lukacs is. So,
Mm,
um, so Joe's going to join us, and today it's going to be about first of all, what is a constrained environment versus an independent advisor,
sure.
or an advisor in a constrained environment versus one that's independent. What Joe has helped hundreds of advisors go independent, from wirehouses, insurance companies, banks, you name it. I think is a really good resource to kind of give his outsider looking in perspective on the differences. And let's start with defining how I define it.
Sure.
And I believe it's how Joe defines a constrained environment
Mhm.
that an advisor may be in versus an independent one. Now, a constrained environment, in my definition, is I came from the insurance world that one of the large insurance company, BD RIAs, we had, the normal constraints, right? We had to sell a certain amount of their product in a certain amount of time. We had very limited investment options, and compliance was really built around the lowest common denominator, not the person that's doing fee-based planning or asset management.
Mhm.
In the wirehouse, it's hey, you're a W-2 employee inside of here, and here's your rules and regs. If you don't like it,
Mhm.
hit the bricks.
Mhm.
To the independent side, where an independent environment is, compliance is not built to lowest common denominator.
Right.
Our compliance guardrails here: how does it benefit the client? How does it
Mhm.
benefit the advisor? Right.
Mhm.
um, Having open architecture, be able to recommend a solution to a client that's not competing with maybe core product that that company is also manufacturing and selling,
Right.
through you as a salesperson. So when you hear me see or hear the term constrained environment or constrained advisor, it's those wirehouse insurance company bank models, as opposed to the independent RIA channel that we're going to talk about.
Sure.
Joe, how many clients have you? How many advisors have you? If you were to put a number on over 30 years, how many of you helped make the leap?
So I'm a bit of a stat junkie, so I can give you a number. So last year we did
Oh,
5. So I think we're at 154 right now in
hmm.
total. And just for everybody, because I want to make sure this is very clear, I'm not a recruiter. I've never gotten paid to make a move. The way it works for me is I've got a client who calls me or texts me or 911 me one day and says, I've got to get out of here. I've got to make a move. Right. That's the way it starts. And I think that's what, your journey in this work
Mm-hmm.
game started when it was percolating for a while. Threshold hits, trip happens, decision made, right? So that's what I've seen. If you really think about what causes I think if you were to so here's the deal. If you were to lay the business case out, like take all the emotions out and take the math out, because sometimes there's deferred comp and all these other handcuffs, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not golden, by the way, they're lead because they weigh you down. They're not really gold. Um, if you lay out the business case, I don't see how an advisor would want to ever stay at a firm, just from the business case perspective. But let's just, because that's, that not just the math, by the way. So you use the term, I use the term friction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you use the word constraint, right? So simple example, right? Very simple example, day-to-day example, using technology for communication, right? Whether it's text messaging, which I know some say, yeah, but we've got this thing now. That's fine. But can you do video email? Can you do Loom, BombBomb, things like that? So in other words, there's a competitive disadvantage, not just friction constraint. You're not able to execute some of the most powerful communication sales tools, because most firms, and Carm, you kind of hit it, but I'm going to kind of emphasize this. Most firms' compliance regulations are built to the lowest common denominator. So in other words, hey, 2% of our advisors may do something stupid. So we've got to make sure we punch the other 98% and make sure nobody does it. And that's just the way it is in the real world. And I face this. I'm currently right now kind of finishing up some of my legacy wirehouse clients. But I still have my fingers in pretty much every major firm. and I see what that world looks like, and I
Mm.
see what the IBD world looks like, and I see what the hybrid world looks like, and I see what the RA looks like, and that would be about the spectrum: firm, wirehouse, national insurance company, IBD, a hybrid IBD, RA, right? So that would be my ease of use, right? So we're just
Mm.
talking about friction or constraint, right? We're not talking math. We're just talking constraint. Most constrained, least constrained. Bottom line.
That's right. And at the top end of that, the independent fee only RA like we are,
Mm-hmm.
clients come first.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you an example of some constraints in the insurance company world, you can't, and I can speak for the one I was at. I was on their advisory board for their RIA
Sure.
for many years before I left.
Sure.
But if I wanted to buy treasury bonds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very common strategy we're using on clients, and a lot of people are because of interest rates, right? We
Mm-hmm.
could not do that there. We couldn't use high yield money markets. Why?
Right.
It competed with their manufactured annuities that did the same thing.
Right. Right.
But heck, they made a lot more money by selling that
Mm-hmm.
product instead of
Mm-hmm.
actually doing what's right by the client and
Yep.
buying bonds or a high yield money market. So there's
Yep.
a real, talk about a constraint, and the handcuff the golden handcuffs. And I heard this for, I was there 17 years.
Lead, not gold or lead. Keep that in mind. Right.
So, well, we heard the term golden handcuffs for many
Right.
years, and I've spoken to, I don't know, 100 advisors at this point. Some that have come, some that have left and went elsewhere, some
Sure.
that are still there. And there's a major difference is all the advisors in those insurance companies and wirehouses have golden handcuffs, or they have handcuffs.
Yep.
The difference is someone like me looked down and said, I got handcuffs on. I got to get out of them.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of the population says, wow, look at these beautiful golden handcuffs. Aren't they nice, right? So if you're okay with the handcuffs,
they're an asset. Yeah, they think they're an asset, actually.
yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. So that's kind of whether you think they're gold or you just think they're handcuffs. In a conversation, 10 minutes, I could tell an advisor,
Yeah,
whether they think they're gold or they're restrictive.
Mm-hmm.
But out of the 100 and over 150,
Yep.
What's been the outcome? I mean, have you had any bad experiences? Advisors go back, like what?
I've only had two. There's only been two in my entire career, and it's a very fascinating story again because I know we're not putting names on the board. So I had two clients. They didn't know each other, by the way, but it all happened within the same time frame, which was interesting. They at the time were out, and it still is one of the largest independent broker dealers out there. We won't get into names. And the same firm, same national or international wirehouse, came a calling. At the time, they were really pushing the let's get some independence back in the fold deal, if you will. And at the time, and I have to give every context on this. This is probably 15, 18 years ago. Both these gentlemen were going through a divorce. So, and I was working with their personal clients at the time. And so they brought me this conversation, this offer, and we really had a heart to heart. Like, I'm not a recruiter; I don't get paid if somebody goes or not. Quite frankly, if they go somewhere, it's a lot more work for me to get stuff to get done. But we really had and they both understood that they were doing this for the money. And if the deals were back then, let's say 200, 250% of T12, they both got 400% of T12. On a 9-year hitch. They both did it for the money. They both knew they would do it. They both told me, hey, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to dance with the devil for 9 years because I get to recapitalize my personal net worth. It's okay. And so, 9 years and a day or a couple of weeks later, they're both out.
Oh,
so
okay.
They did their time, we like to say, and then they went back out on the independent world, right? But that's been the only two times. In fact, I would say in 95% of the cases, it's why'd I wait so long? I've never had anybody regret going down that road, going from constraint to less constraint to less constraint to less constraint, right? From that, I just haven't seen it. Now, and you and I both agree, it's not, it's not. I just want to make sure we get this properly. Look, this is the big, who you partner with. There's two major decisions every advisor makes in their career. Decision number one: what do I want to be in this business, and am I coming in this business? That's step one, right? So the first thing is, why am I here? The second one is, who am I going to partner with, right? And a lot of people get in this game initially, and again, we're going to date ourselves a little bit here, but when the firms were all about the firms and they had big brands, and there was bull commercials and a breed apart and all this stuff, and you just don't see it anymore because the marketplace has changed. It just has, right? So what happens is that you come into this game, but then you got to go, well, who do I want to partner with? And that's why it's a very important decision. That's why for most advisors, they can get, I'll just say like day one, they get up. I'm not really happy. But it's not to that threshold yet. It's a minor irritant, right? And then over time, as your business grows and situations change, minor irritants become a little bit more larger irritants, become now major irritants. And at some point, most advisors will get to a threshold when they're like, I can't take it anymore. So a lot of times the motivation for someone to make a change, look, the math matters. So we're not going to discount math, but I rarely find it to be the initial driver. Sort of like that's an added bonus. Most advisors, if we were to poll them and say, give me the top 5 reasons you got into this business, freedom is going to show up in that mix somewhere. Number 2, number 1, number 4, it's going to show up, right? It's going to show up as as a human need, as a moving towards value. And so what they realize over time is they it's a false freedom. It's not really true. They don't own their business. Now we can sit there and say, well, yeah, my clients can come with me. True, depending on your legal constraints. But ultimately, you're working for the man or woman, well, the reality is this. So in firms that are public, especially, there's conflicts everywhere. So, if I'm CEO of XYZ firm, who do I report to? Shareholders. So if I'm a CEO of a major wirehouse, my loyalty is to the stock price of my shareholders and my margins. Why else am I loyal to that? Because my comp is based on that price and everything else. Then who else am I loyal to? Well, middle management. Well, then what? Well, if a client's really not happy, we got to take care of them. So we'll take care of them. So the advisor is literally the last person on the pecking order and totem pole when it comes to firms. Because I've seen this in my career. We're not getting into names, but I've seen firms, client makes a complaint, firm decides, the firm's attorneys decide, hey, we're just going to settle this. Oh, and you're going to pay 75% of it too, by the way. Like, even though the advisor did nothing wrong, it was documented, they just want to dispose something. So now you're going to get dinged for it, right? And you have no choice. Like, you got to go for the ride, whether you like it or not, right? So just things like that. And I've seen accounts getting taken away from advisors to other advisors. I mean, there's just stories upon stories I can tell you after doing this for almost 30 years that it's like if you pull the curtain back at how these firms operate, and I'm not saying they're not ethical or anything like, I'm not saying they're immoral or anything, but you got to, when you're an advisor in that ecosystem, you got to really know where you stand, right? In essence. And look, man, you just don't stay like, again, shareholders, C-suite, management, client, and then you. And they will do that, man. And they will do that every day. And that is one thing I've seen over and over again. So, I think, and I don't care if you've been at a firm 20 years, I've seen a client get shown the door after 22 years at a firm, not a ping. You know why? His father-in-law was in corporate. They didn't like him, so they politically fired him. And so
wow.
my guy was a bonus, right? And they didn't care because they are who they are. So they may tell you what you want to hear, but I've always said, I don't care what they tell you, man. What are they doing for you? Like, tell me the action. Tell me the resources they're deploying, right?
I say this all the time. Your actions are so loud, I can't hear what you're saying.
Exactly.
I say it to my kids. They love that when I do that.
Yeah. And look, the bottom line is why an advisor doesn't make a move is fear. Now, it may mask itself as some other, well, I got this deferred comp over here, or, I got this, like, there's always a narrative of why they won't make a change. But the bottom line, when I talk to my clients who are contemplating this and we kind of walk through the process, it's fear of the unknown. Why does an advisor stay at a firm for 20, 30, 40 years? Certainty. They're certainty driven.
Yeah.
The old saying, the devil that I know, right, versus what I don't know, right? So that's always the challenge that you have, when you're looking to invite advisors to I call it the other side of the fence. and you can talk to them and you can make logical case to like it's no, even when you do the math, it's like a no-brainer, and forget
Yeah.
what they're going to get with the net worth and their families and stuff like that. And yet some of them don't move, or a lot of them don't move. And you're like, I don't understand why. And because, it's easier not to, bottom line is, I've got my boogeyman. It's corporate. I can complain about it. I've got my story, why I'm not as successful as I want to be. And I'm certain of what I've got, and I'm comfortable because I don't have to change. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to be happy. So don't accuse comfortable and happy are two different
Mm,
things.
yeah.
So you may be comfortable where you are, but by no means are you happy. And here's what's going to happen 8 out of 10 times if you don't make a move. At some point, your career will wind down, and you're going to have this time where you'll look back at your life, your world. And I call it the rocking chair test. And you're going to sit back and you look at your game and you go, when I had that conversation with Carmine 20 years ago or 10 years ago, you know what? I should have leaned into that. I didn't. And then we have regret, right? So I just think there's a lot of, I think there's a, we like to make it about the tech stack and the culture and the compliance scenario and the math, because math has to be there, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, it's still an emotional decision by and large. The other stuff
I had
has to
a
be there, but it's emotion.
I had a conversation with someone at the insurance company that I was at, a friend of mine for many years, and conversation wasn't about him leaving, coming here. Well, he kind of got on to the point of his frustrations, and I said, Joe, there's no reason to put up with this. There's an easy path, right? The
Mm-hmm.
path to independence is much easier today than
Mm-hmm.
it was 5 years ago, and it's much easier than it was 15 years ago.
Sure.
And he said, well, I only have 10 years left. And I said, well, why not make the last 10 years your best 10 years, your
Exactly.
easiest 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he kind of paused and thought about it, but there is a fear. And you mentioned family. And the one thing I've seen, 11 advisors we have today that
Mm-hmm.
we've helped liberate out of these constrained environments is
Sure.
that not so much the changes in their practices. They've all been able to grow and scale much faster than they ever did where they were.
Mm-hmm.
Is their lifestyles have changed positively with
Mm-hmm.
their families, they're able to detach. They don't
Yep.
have sales requirements in a certain amount of years. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
new compliance issues and mandates coming down that don't even apply to them, but they have to still do it because the person that just joined their team has a year in and doesn't know any better.
Right.
I've seen tremendous changes in those lifestyles, and you
Mm-hmm.
helped advisors that were in the constrained environments and now they're independent. You see the same thing with these clients, correct? Is their lifestyles have gotten much better?
I mean, it gets back to lack of friction, right? So when you
Mm,
have more autonomy in creating the model, or I call it the game that you want, the derivative of that is that you can kind of build it on your terms, and you don't have, to your comment, you don't have certain, credits to have to do by a certain period of time. You don't have to sit at certain, bottom of the table, top of the table, middle of the table, whatever those tables are. You don't have to worry about that. And so, if you think about it, those are things that that no longer occupy your mind. So now other things that are more important to you and your family, right, can go in there, right? Like growing the business, doing best by the client, really having, really, and I always said this, I haven't said this recently, but I may need to go back to it. If you think about just being an advisor, right? Just, again, I don't care what your business card is right now. It is the best, I said this, I think, in my vision conference. Being an advisor is the best platform to practice 10x methodology
mm,
because you already have built-in leverage with fee-based AUM. That's why you're seeing all the PE firms around, because as one PE guy told me recently in a conversation, he goes, show me a business that has 50% gross margins and 98% recurring revenue.
doesn't happen.
It's just like, show me another
Or
business that does. Yeah.
95% retention rate. Show
Well,
me a restaurant
98%.
that's got, yeah,
He
it's
said
crazy.
98. Yeah, where you
Yeah.
find it, right? So if we just look at that from again, just forget what you do for a living, just look at it as a business, right? So hey, I want to sell you a business. You're almost gonna be guaranteed 50% gross margins, and you're gonna have 98% recurring revenue, repeatable. And not only that, you're gonna be going into a marketplace that is actually going to have less competition over the next 5 to 10 years because of retirements. And you're going to have more opportunity because of boomer retirements, advisors selling their businesses, and just people selling their businesses, having liquidity events. So why, or you can open up a pizza joint. Like, I mean, if you think about it, right? I mean, ultimately, like, what better business to be in? And that's what I've always told young people when I go speak. When somebody asks me to go speak to young people about a career inside this game, it's like, it's a beautiful game. It's like, you can't find another profession. I've looked and I've challenged this. Lawyer, doctor, accountant, dentist, I don't care. Man, we do this from anywhere with recurring revenue. And if you do, and I say this with the utmost respect, if you're just competent and decent, you'll make high six figures. If you ever figure it out, you'll make multiple seven. And if you really get your game together, you can do 8 figures in this game.
Yeah.
Show it to me. Show me where else that's. And oh, by the way, you're not buying a franchise. We're not opening a McDonald's, which costs $2.5 million, by the way, to go do these days, to flip burgers. So, I mean, show me another business opportunity that
There's virtually
has this much alpha.
There's virtually minimal barrier to entry.
Yeah,
right.
Minimal.
You don't need to go to law school for 8 years or medical school and
correct.
And these things, and then trade. At that point, you're trading hours for dollars. Where
experience.
The last 3 hires we've had, they're under 30.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Younger people need to be more. They need to be aware of the shift that's happening. And I mean, almost 40. What is it? The average age of financial advisor now is 61.
Yeah, or 58, 61, depends on data point you're looking at. But it's going that way. It's not going down. Put it that way.
No, it's not going down.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's end on this because I think this is a good thing to end on. Speaking to an advisor in one of those constrained environments, what would they need to do if they don't decide to leave? If they decide the handcuffs are golden, I'm good. What would they need to do to stay competitive with this changing environment?
Well, if they're not going to change their environment, then they got to change their identity. Now, what do I mean by change their identity? They've got to view themselves as an intrapreneur. So versus intra, which would be external. Intra is inside the organization, but you have to take personal responsibility for your game, right? So in other words, it's okay based upon my constraints, friction, model, whatever I've got. What is the ultimate version? What can I do, right? And I do have several clients that are still at firms, and they're doing. I think one of them will do about 5 million. Him and his team will do about 5-6 million this year. We talk about this all the time. Like, hey, you know what? Don't go to the wholesaler. We don't need to go to lunch in. We don't need to drink that Kool-Aid. Like and this will always piss off the sales managers and branch managers. I want you to look at it as like you're the high-end world-class surgeon and you're at this hospital. And this is just where you do your thing. The clients are with you because of you, not because of what's on your business card. It's about you, right? And that's the psychology and the identity I want you to have. Like right now, we choose that XYZ does a good job for our clients, so we hang, right? Constraints and all, right? But ultimately, it's my responsibility as the advisor / surgeon / entrepreneur to go ahead and take responsibility for doing things. And the one thing is, and I'll share a little hack for those firm people that are here. The worst place you can ever go to get something new is compliance. It's an auto no, right? And so you're better off going to somebody like your branch manager, sales manager, complex manager, regional manager, and say, hey, I'd like to try this because, and get them to ally with you and champion with you because they have political capital they can expend on this. And you got to remember some compliance people, and again, they're human, so I'm not going to, they're not bad human beings, but their job is to make sure nothing bad happens at the firm. Bottom line, that's what their mission statement is. So if you want to bring something new in, you got to remember, human beings, that's more work for us, more possibility for something going wrong. I'm not going to stick my head out for that. No, you can't do that, right? Or what the truth is, hey, you know what? We're looking at that. We'll get back to you. 3 years later, they're still looking at that, right?
Right.
So that's probably more the way in actuality. So if you want to get, and I've had clients get some stuff done at some firms, which have been interesting over the years, but it's always been because we didn't go to compliance first. We went down. We went down the sales side of the
Mm.
organization, not the compliance side of the organization, and got some political capital there, and then they carried the bucket for us. And look, they're getting paid, you know, the firm's taking whatever 50, 60% of my revenue. Let them work, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's what
Yeah,
I think that's what, if you're going to stay where you are, don't never think job employee. That's the exact opposite of what I just said.
yeah, right.
It's like, hey man, I'm rocking my game here, but it's my game. And you guys are my partners in this game. I'm paying you 60% of my revenue for resources. Maximize that return on investment as any entrepreneur would do. Right? Ask. Be sticky, be a greasy, you know, be a noisy wheel. It's okay, right? You know, you don't want to be a pain, but don't be silent. Because remember, leadership at these organizations, local, regional, national, you know what? Don't, if nobody's crying for anything, it's all good. If
Yep,
nobody's stomping their feet, it's all good. Like, they are rarely going to come to you. And if anything shows up as an initiative, it's a response to a lot of people being pissed off about
that's
something
right.
that now have to respond to. It wasn't like the CEO of XYZ firm woke up one day and said, you know what? We really got to go ahead and do this for our troops. It doesn't work that way in the real world, right? It just doesn't.
So, Joe, I'm going to wrap this up. We have some questions in our Q&A here. I'm going to just
Sure.
answer just a few easy ones. For the few that I'm not going to be able to get to, I'll ping you
Sure.
personally. We have
Sure.
your information. So one was, what was the breaking point for me? And it was in 2019, the insurance company we had a very low minimum and core product that we had to do to maintain our payout, maintain our affiliation and benefits for our family. And they took that minimum and they basically 4X'd it. And I got that email 2 days before going on a 19-day safari with my family where we had no internet, no TV, no nothing. And within the first couple of days, I knew, like, yeah, that's the straw. As a CFP, and having to hand them a conflict of interest disclosure every time I engage with a potential new client. And now you're trying to turn me to an insurance salesman. Okay, so that was a straw. Other person asked how many advisors we have, 11, counting myself, and all came from constrained environments. So they all came from, and one was with an independent RIA. So here's what's interesting is you may be looking at an RIA, but you got to peel that onion, because this was a very restrictive RIA that capped the amount of planning fees that advisor could charge. And that was his core competency, was consulting and fee-based planning. So it became very hard for him. So it's not just any RA will do. To Joe's point before, if you're going to partner with a firm, their core competency should be your core competency. It shouldn't be. And one of the advisors that joined, he was looking at another firm and they didn't have any advisors that charged fees for planning. And his response to me was, I'm not going to be the first one. And all 11 of us charge fees for planning. It's our core competency. So very interesting, to talk to other people at other firms that, even though they're independent, you got to peel that onion, make sure and take your time. And this is an exercise I go through with every potential advisor, is you have primary concerns, secondary concerns. Primary are the couple that are deal breakers. And we have a form that the advisor fills out. Hey, I want to be able to use my DBA. I've been branding it for 20 years. Great, Roger that. I want to be able to invest in this. I want to be able to do seminars, right? And then the secondaries are like, hey, look, these are important, but they're not deal breakers. Right. And if the firm you're courting doesn't give you that as an exercise, do it yourself and ask the questions. It's going to be a very easy way to say, I'm getting bombarded with all these offers. How do I rate them internally? There's your scoring system. And there were 2 advisors that got offered very big paychecks to go to their firms.
Sure.
But when you go through the peeling the onion, if a firm is writing you a check, they're making it up somewhere. Peel the onion. And turns out both of those firms, when they looked into it, you're right, this is where they're making it up. And they decided to join us instead of getting that upfront money. So it's just being very intentional. This is a decision you want to make that you never want to have to do again. No one loves to move, and there is work. It's not for the weak. I'm writing a book through Forbes right now. It's in final edits. It should be out Q2, Q3 of this year about why advisors should go independent. And there's a whole chapter on the psychology that you need to be able to do this. It's not easy. It's a month or two of grind.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to do the work, there isn't a single advisor that I've spoken to, and I'm in multiple masterminds with independent. No one's ever said, man, what a mistake. No, the number one answer is, I wish I did it sooner, and put me in that book as well. I spent 17 years in an environment that I was told it'll be okay. We're going to change it. It never changed. They care about pushing product, and that's fine. If you want to sell insurance, go to insurance company.
Right.
If you want to make client impact, you got to be on the same side of the table with the client. There can't be any conflicts of interest. No blurred lines. Client pays you X and they get X. Make it very easy for the client to understand. And I'll tell you, our ability to grow, I think the last 3 years, Joe, I don't think I shared it, we're up 550%.
No, you didn't
Not
share with me.
because-
So congratulations on that. That's good, man. Really
Not
good.
because we have a new LinkedIn post, not because of all the, whatever we don't market. It's because we had the capabilities. And when we asked these clients to come with us, when we gave them the why we're leaving this constrained environment, going independent, these relationships got solidified in ways I never thought they could. Trust grew, referrals and introductions grew. It was literally asking your clients to rehire you, and them, your clients taking a moment going, well, he said all this great work for us, and we're going to have more options and more capability. Shoot, of course we're coming.
Yeah.
So
all
good.
I would love, really good. I would love to share like real quick. I know we're a little over time here, but there's something I call, when a client's looking at it, hey, I'm going to go check out what the other, my options are. Hey, Joe, what do you think is, what should be most important to me? Right. Cause I think, it's your kind of the checklist. So I want to kind of embellish on that a little bit, cause I think I want to add some value here. So there are what I call several C's, right? Culture, right? When you're looking at an organization, whether you're going to be bolting in the mothership or as an IAR, right? It's still about culture. Then it's about then core competencies, right? To what you just spoke about, right? How are things done? It's about community. Are there training, mastermind, meetups? Like I know you do that, right? So that matters. It is about compliance. There is, what is the compliance? What does it look like? How's it done, right? Compensation. Look, if you're shopping for the lowest or the best margin, to what you just said is so true. They're making it somewhere, man. Like there's no free lunch in this game, right? And I think advisors sometimes get caught up in the math too much, and they don't look at culture, competencies, compliance, how all those other things, community, how all those other things are really going to impact them more, right? If you will, than, a couple extra points, right? Because you got to live, because ultimately you're going to live inside that culture. You're going to be interacting with that culture, with those competencies, right? With all those things. And, you're going to make it, I told somebody this not too long ago, we're evaluating situations, one of the 5 I did last year. And he said, well, this one here, I'm going to get extra 2 points here. I said, yeah, but man, you're buying a platform. Do you understand? You're buying their tech stack. You're buying compliance. Like that's all you're buying, man. Like there's no real, like they're gonna serve you, but there's no real culture here. It's like a service. It's like a service platform. They'll handle your compliance. They'll handle your tech stack. They'll handle your custodial situation. I guess another C, custodian, another C there. But they don't do any masterminds like you do. They don't do any training. They don't do a lot of the other things that you're going to want down the road. And is it really worth 2 points of differential to go to the other situation where all these things are in place? And the grid's a little bit less, but you're going to grow your business so far beyond that with the multiples. It's like we're looking at the pennies and we're missing the dollars.
Right.
So let's not do that. Right. So I just want everybody to know that don't get caught up in a math piece only, because in a lot of cases, you're going to regret that decision. You got to look at all these areas. And I'm telling you, the number one is culture, competencies, capabilities. Those 3 C's right there have got to be the majority of your decision-making syntax.
Compliance to me is compliance equals capabilities.
Sure, I
Because
can
if
see that.
you want the capability of doing something, compliance doesn't allow you to do it, then you're going to hit a roadblock. And if you're courting different firms or speaking to someone about potentially joining, part of this is an idea that you should do. Part of our process is any potential advisor, they have a call with their chief compliance officer. So we brought in an attorney to do all of our compliance. He was a former state securities attorney, worked at a couple of the large investment banks in the city, a lot of experience. But I want you to go through everything you've ever done for marketing, what you're
Yeah,
thinking of doing, what
sure.
your OBAs are. Like, give him worst case scenario. Don't hear from me. Hear from Alan. Alan
Right.
will give you the skinny, like, great, we can do all this stuff. This is how you submit it to me. This is, hey, if you want to submit 50 posts at a time, just call me once you submit them and I'll approve them all. So compliance, Alan works with us, not against us, very different than the firms.
That's key. And I'm so glad you
Yeah.
said that, because if you weren't going to say it, I was like, so the major compliance differential is at a firm, it's no, where in your scenarios, in most independent scenarios, it's let's figure a way how to do this.
That's right.
Not no,
That's
you
right.
can't do this. And that, if you're looking to grow your business, that's why we talk about, we talk about friction and constraints. That's one of the largest things. Like like I've got clients at firms that, oh, we can't do bombs, we can't do looms. Oh, we can't record. That's the best one. I'm gonna do a client educational webinar. Great, let's do it. But I can't record it. What do you mean you can't record it? Oh, they won't let us. What's the difference, right? Everybody who shows up on a live webinar is going to be 10 people to watch the replay.
That's
Not
right.
every client's been right, and it's just like nonsensical stuff. Like if I'm the compliance person, I'd rather have it recorded so I can look at it and see what they really said, right? Not the
That's right.
script that they may use, right? So I mean, it's just nonsensical like stuff, right? And like those are the constraints. And and my belief is, and I think Carmine shares this too, is that advisors, our industry, our profession is morphing. It's not just about doing financial plans and asset allocation and let's go rock it out. Like advisors they gotta coach, they gotta train, they gotta teach. Like you gotta be in front of your clients, because if you're not in front of them doing it, they're gonna get it from the internet or TV or anywhere that's not good for us, right?
Oh yeah.
So if you can't do webinars and record them and do bombs or looms or do a Friday, like if you can't really communicate, like your communication strategies are degraded because the compliance won't let you do it because you're in that constrained environment. And I say this respectfully, you're at a massive disadvantage today, which will grow into the future.
That's right.
Because of how the industry is going to evolve over the next 5 years.
So I have a list of the questions we didn't get to, and I apologize. I want to be mindful of people's times. We ran a little bit over, but when Joe and I start riffing like this, it's just no.
I didn't know we had a timeline, but yeah, whatever you want
we
to do.
didn't. I just it's fine. What I'm going to do is I will reach out to each one of you independently. We'll reach out and answer your questions. If you want to follow up with us, all of my information is in LinkedIn. Joe, where can people find you? The 18 sites that you have.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I would say my core website is coachjoe.guru, GURU, COACHJOE. From there, you can go to the multiple, as you referenced, the multiple sites there. But that's my core branding site that kind of tell you about me, different things that I do, different projects I'm entertaining now. That's probably the best place to go. And or just find me on LinkedIn. And if we're not hooked up on LinkedIn, I'd love to have you as a connection. And we do have a community called Magellan Network on LinkedIn also. It's a great place to check out things too. And Carm, thank you for the time today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat.
And thanks everyone for joining. And I will talk to you soon. Hopefully see you on the next webinar. Take care, everyone.